This is so ironic that I'm giving a presentation before Caird Rexroad. He's like the admiral of the wet Navy, and maybe I'm a field officer. But what you're going to see different about this is my bias and my nearness to the industry and research. So you're going to see more details than I think what Caird will show, which is the broad picture. And just last night I was looking at aquaculture articles. Evidently the guy who wrote For Fish, was that Goldberg? Greenberg? Can't remember his name. He just put out the first night we arrived, he had some special on TV that chronicled him eating fish every year. And it's a fantastic story. I've only read part of it, but as you go into it, it says the average consumer in the United States eats seafood that's traveled 5,000 miles to get to their plate because we import everything. It's just crazy, 5,000 miles on your seafood to get. So I don't know what his backing is on that, but that's a fantastic fact. And also because of my bias, I'm kind of like a Packer fan trying to describe the NFL and Tom Brady or something. So I'm biased. So you're going to see my focus here. And I'm sectioning this into prioritizing research, what research is important. We have to do this when we work with the ARS. So I've done this for over 2 decades. And then I have a section on needs and strategic assistance, I think, to increase farm fish production in Minnesota that would help. And there's some overlap here with everyone. And this was what I did a couple weeks ago, but I think it's going to be Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, and then niche for walleye, char, and coho. And there's other things we came up with yesterday. And large production technology. So when I say RAST, I'm saying at least 2 million pounds and maybe 10 million pounds. This is agribusiness. Please don't call it industrial. It's an agribusiness. And then I think aquaponics could be an agribusiness like Superior Fresh, or it could be a mom and pop owner-operator. And I don't want to rule out net pens because it is such a successful technology, but it may not be permittable. But I say if there's a situation like in Washington State, Pacific Seafoods produces 12 million pounds a year in the Columbia River in net pens. And it just so happens they're doing it in an Indian reservation, and maybe they're bypassing some standard rules, but it is happening. And they're the second largest producer in the country. So as I described yesterday, I break it down in what biological aspects would we do research in and what technical aspects. And I don't tell you everything I want to do because some things I keep secret. But I'm telling you a lot of things because NOAA does really good research. The USDA does really good research. Universities, when I graduated from Iowa State 25 years ago, the 2 best chemical engineering programs were was University of Minnesota and University of Wisconsin. I mean, you guys are fantastic engineers. And I hope people will look at this and say, I can do that. And it's not rocket science. You don't have to do nanotechnology to do this. This is the basic engineering. That's why I liked it so much. I can use basic engineering and make big impacts. So the biggest challenge is overcoming barriers to freshwater production of Atlantic salmon. In my mind, I think that's the biggest market. And we have to lower the capital and operating expenses in freshwater. So I might have said it to everyone yesterday, I can't remember, but if I'm going to reduce the cost of producing fish and wrasse, just convincing people that using freshwater is better will knock off 30% of the production cost, of the capital cost, and a little bit of the production cost. But other barriers in freshwater is this early male maturation, so we need a sterile or all-female fish. We see a little bit of opportunistic saprolignia fungal infections, treating that with benign treatments, and something maybe that would work with aquaponics. And then getting rid of this off flavor so you always have perfect tasting fish. And I don't think any of these are completely stopping this, but getting better at this is going to really help and enhance the industry. It's so critical to have an all-female or non-maturing mixed-sex male population because it improves the growth of the fish that's outside of the gonads. And it prevents the decline of fillet attributes. And Atlantic salmon as it's maturing, the fillet goes white and it loses its fat. And if you have a sterile fish, you safeguard all of the germplasm from someone else breeding it and stealing it. And if it escapes, then it's not going to breed with your wild population. And I know the USDA is working really hard on this, but something so simple that's been used for a long time to create a all-female is the generation before. They use a little methyl testosterone to feed the babies. Well, whoever's regulating that use is preventing it from being applied. So it's really hard for these farms to become permitted to use methyl testosterone on a tiny amount of feed. So we need, I'm hoping, just simple standard operating practices that maybe it's that you're going to carbon filter all of that water and prove that nothing escapes. We've got to document that. I want to be able to tell the FDA or whoever's controlling it, you can use this technology and you will have zero testosterone escape, and thus they can apply it. Because they don't want that testosterone to escape to the wild. Or you can use a technique to create sterile fish, which Dr. Zohar and his postdoc scientists have developed. They use silencing genes to stop the early migration of gonad stem cells. So this is fascinating. This is like, I think, the Nobel Prize kind of stuff. They have some substance they add to the water just after the egg has been fertilized, and it interacts with the stem cells and prevents them from migrating to the gonads. And you thus have a sterile fish because they never develop the gonads. It's really exciting. And I know maybe you'll talk about other technologies, but I want to see that sterile fish. We want to have a fish that never matures, that just keeps growing and growing and growing. And not a genetically engineered fish. So here's a very simple study. We talk to industry, we face industry all the time. What is the consequence of growing a triploid all-female Atlantic salmon? So all-female means it's not going to mature until it's probably much bigger than our normal harvest size, but if it's triploid, it's guaranteed not to mature. And the problem with triploid Atlantic salmon is they don't handle stress as well as a diploid. The triploid 3 chromosomes has them not as robust. We think that a recycle system has ideal conditions their whole life. We don't think that triploids are going to cause a problem, but they are a problem in the ocean net pens where you have low oxygen and other things that are problems. So here's a simple research study. It's low-hanging fruit. It's really important to eliminate off flavors. We've done research on this for the last 5 years. We have a decent standard operating practice, but a recent paper really clearly described how you could swim eel at a high speed, not out of welfare range, but you just make sure they're swimming, and they'll depurate out the off-flavor geosmin twice as fast. So instead of going 10 days, it takes 5 days. And it's because the blood is pumping through the gills, and the gills are ventilating harder, this stronger metabolism. So we're going to do a study, if we can get it funded, looking at high speed versus low speed compared to sedentary. It's as simple as saying, I'm going to put them in a circular tank and I'm going to crank up the rotational velocity versus having them in a raceway. And then when you have a low oxygen, physiologically, the fish pump more blood through the gills and they pump water through the gills faster, and that would help remove the geosmin also. So there's a study. As an engineer, we look at studies to get the geosmin out of the water. That really is important because the geosmin comes out of the water, and if the geosmin stays in the water, then the fish can't release it because it's equilibrium. So how do we get it out of the water? And then maybe we can come up with a microbial method to prevent the geosmin and MIB from accumulating in the RAST itself. And I think there's several opportunities here to select a system, microbiology, that prevents that. It's the actinomycete that produces these off-flavor compounds. So geosmin isn't a bacteria, it's an organic compound. It's a tertiary alcohol. And we just don't want those organisms to produce parts per billion levels. We're really getting into the weeds. So I know my dad's talking about nutrition, but I just want to say it in this bottom. The nutritionists at the ARS and NOAA have done all the research that shows how to get to a prime time diet. But just before that goes commercial, we like to rear it in our replicated recycle systems to see how is it impacting the water quality. Because, for example, if you shift to a lot of soy, the anti-nutritionals cause diarrhea. And it's terrible to have that in the recycle system. So before they go commercial, it's nice to do replicated research to see how much waste is actually produced with this and how does it affect the water quality as well as the fish. And the same for the lipids. We just had the second largest trout producer in the country visit us, and they say, oh my gosh, did you know that feed companies are substituting so many other lipids in for fish oil that I can have a diet with 32% fat that costs as much as a diet is 18% fat. In the old days, you just added more fish oil, and this cost a lot more than that. But nowadays, he showed me his pricing, and this diet was almost the same price as that diet. But this diet has so much more energy. More energy means faster growth potentially, or better feed conversions, and less feed has to be added. But the other consequence is, does all that lipid cause visceral fat? So does this fish then have so much fat in the belly that you're wasting it because you just throw it away when you gut the fish? And how does it affect growth? And how does it affect feed conversion? And so forth. So I would love to do this study. And we would raise rainbow trout from say 100 grams up to 1 kilo, 2 kilos, and 3 kilos. And we'd look at fillet attributes and growth and feed and all this. This is a really low-hanging fruit, but it takes 12 at least replicated tanks that are at least 8-foot diameter, because these are big fish. You'll see more about promoting fish population health. We love to focus on systems that we've excluded the obligate pathogen. And if you look at hog and poultry, and they have these confinement buildings that have great biosecurity, it's shifted from obligate pathogens unless you get the bird flu to come in. If you can keep it out, you don't have that. It's shifted to opportunistic pathogens. And in fish farming, we see it's flavobacteria and saprolignia. Saprolignia is a simple fungus. So how do we manage these systems with SOPs and biosecurity and technologies that we don't need to use any antibiotics, pesticides, and we don't harm the fish? And we really like benign treatments. The industry is typically use formalin, which is an embalming agent, which is maybe possibly mutagenic, and I think it is. So we like these excited water, hydrogen peroxide, peracetic acid, ozone, things that disappear right away and are very benign on the environment. So I think more research focused on ways we can get away from antibiotics and pesticides completely. So now I just did biology. I'm going to shift to production environment. And I wanted to give an example of why it's not just about breeding. And I'm sure Karen's going to have great discussions on why we need better breeding. And we've benefited because in a recycle system, trout that are bred for faster growth can actually utilize that faster growth because they have ideal conditions and nothing is holding them back. But we talked to the Norwegians, we just had this big guy in the pesticide sales, vaccine sales, saying that he's shocked that in 25 years of Norwegian salmon aquaculture, the fish takes 17.5 months to harvest from when stocked on average every year, even though we've improved the breeding massively in the medicines and the vaccines. It's all being overshadowed by the environment. The environment is preventing that benefit from being realized. And that's even with harvest size dropping in the recent years, and that's dropping because the sea lice are so hard to handle that they're trying to get them out of the ocean quicker than before. So this is just highlighting, and then yesterday I showed a slide on rainbow trout growth, and rainbow in raceways was half the size of it was in a RAST, with the same fish fed the same feed. So production system is critical, as well as breeding. And you know what Norway's doing? If Norway wants to hit 5 million tons of fish production by 2050, they want their industry to be larger than their oil industry. And right now they're putting in, and they're having the industry match their money. I bet they're going to put $1 billion into land-based systems in the next 5 years. I've heard of companies saying that in the next 10 years we're going to put $2 billion into it, just one company. This is mind-blowing numbers. You should visit Norway. But it's on shortening the production cycle so they don't have the fish in the ocean as long. And there's actually a lot of economic return. If they can get that fish out of the ocean in less than 1 year, they have to rest the location for a year. What's that called when you change crops? But they have to rest the location. They can't restock it. So anyway, if they can get the fish out of there in less than a year, then it's a really clean cycle, and they can actually get it back in production sooner, and they make more money. So now I'm shifting it. We're in production system. We have to promote fish health. And when you see G by E, growth by environment, or genetics by environment, environment is all of these factors and more. It's feed too. But we've done research in everything that's bolded, where we've looked at how does the oxygen concentration, the carbon dioxide concentration, and the nitrate affect Atlantic salmon and rainbow trout growth and survival and performance and welfare. We're starting to look at hormones. We've done a little work on density. We've done work on photoperiod. 24-hour light by far gives us the best performance with trout and salmon. We've looked at swimming speed. They all have a big importance. So all of this impacts the performance of the fish. It's all the E, the environment. And in a RAST, I was trying to figure how do I best illustrate this. So if you think of these as going from ideal, the best you could achieve in growth, to the worst. And you look at a lot of the environment factors: feed, photoperiod, density, temperature, oxygen, carbon dioxide, suspended solids, pathogens. I think our RASTs are so well done, and the water quality and the conditions are so optimized that I don't think we can get any better growth than that out of that fish. And I think that we can design this at 2 million pounds a year or 10 million pounds a year. That system will work. I don't think all systems are equal though. So when you go shopping for a car, is there a difference between a Yugo and a Tesla? You pay more, you get more. And I think with the right recycle system, you get what you pay for if you're lucky. Sometimes you pay a lot and get crap, because people don't know them yet. So I'm trying to show, I've seen a lot of RAST technologies, and not all of them are ideal. A lot of them aren't. So usually the farmer won't pay for the very best feed. And they haven't known the best photoperiod. They still think that they can use 12-12, 12 hours of light, 12 hours of dark, natural. And their density, sometimes they think, oh, if I just put more fish in, I'll produce more. And they have unrealistic densities. Maybe they hit the temperature perfectly, because that's easy. And then they start feeding really heavy, and they can't maintain the oxygen concentration, so it's not saturation, it's 70%. The fish grow slower. And instead of having CO2 less than 20 milligrams per liter, it's 30, because they've under-designed their stripping units. So the fish grow slower. And they're not using ozone, and the solids are high. The fish can't even see the feed. It's filth. And they get high solids and poor growth. And maybe they have a pathogen. Pathogen's either perfect or they're out of business. So this is just a little opportunistic something. So the net result is you don't have perfect growth. And okay, so my growth isn't perfect, so instead of producing 1,000 tons a year, I'm producing 700 tons a year. We see this too often. So then you have a business plan, and you've injected your capital, and you think you have your operating cost, but your production is now 30% less than you thought. Well, you're out of business. So you can't afford it. And you can look at this in flow-through systems, and first use you've got ideal, and fifth use you've got terrible, and you don't have the growth that we see in the best recycle system. And it's the same with net pins. Environment has a huge effect on performance. So we want to improve the unit processes. That's the water treatment technology to optimize the culture environment. We want to reduce the capital and operating costs through economies of scale. If you build it bigger, it's cheaper for the production, in a little bit. We want to improve each technology. We want to improve its design. And we want to see more standardization in equipment and construction methods, which thus lowers your cost as well. So we do a lot of work with suppliers and builders and anybody that we can help is going to help the industry, we hope, in that level. But just two examples are, carbon dioxide removal is the largest energy user in a RAST in general, because first of all, you have to have a lot of air-water contacting, so that's a lot of energy. And then you've got to ventilate that air out of the building, because if you don't flush the CO2 out into the atmosphere, it's going to inhibit CO2 removal in the building. Am I out of time?
We're running out of time, but you just started late.
I'm almost done. So anyway, there's a lot of energy that we can save with recovering that heat in the ventilated air or preventing the cold air from leaving. And there's a lot of energy we can save in optimization by adjusting how much we ventilate based on the CO2 removal requirements. So there's a lot of cool research here, and it's not rocket science. This is very basic, simple research, applied research. We're also wanting to look at, and we've built this, we're going to put in our next 5-year work plan, instead of taking that air that we vent out of the building, we're simply going to scrub it. That means we're going to use a strong base to pull the CO2 out of the air, and then we recycle the air. The air never leaves the building, so that big heat loss or heat gain is eliminated. We want to use more membrane biological reactors to reclaim the water alkalinity and ions that we have. And we're trying to optimize it and simplify it. I'm sorry. Boy, isn't that gross? The speakers has their phone ring. I thought it was turned off on the sound. Sorry about that. So there's a lot of research. Ozone, we know ozone's the silver bullet, but better integrating into the system is critical. Investors want to know more information at their fingertips to know that their investment is making money. The farm manager does, the team. We need to know what is in the inventory, so we're looking at machine vision. They do machine vision in net pens. Well, machine vision now, you actually have facial recognition programs that could be developed for fish that would actually say, oh, that's Tom and that's Joe. It'll know all the fish in your tank and track their growth. We want to work with, say, Amazon's Internet of Things and cloud, where they do this stuff, or other companies to develop the inventory management and feed management. We've done ultrasonic waste feed control, just video image analysis. Is that particle leaving the bottom of the tank? Feed. Is there a trend in waste feed? Control the feeder. And you save money, you get better growth. We need to have automation software for real-time water quality assessment and control. This is just taking what we have and integrating it better. Let me finish up here. We're doing research with the Norwegians on how do we have better hydraulics in these are huge tanks. In large tanks, we need to do better with fish transfer with large fish and large tanks. We need to do better. When you have a RAS, you have an environment that you can treat that fish with the utmost humane and harvest. So it doesn't get dragged through a water column and a purse seine until it struggles and dies. It is rested at harvest. That has a huge effect on shelf life. We need to show that. Aquaponics. There's so much research. The worst thing that's happened to aquaponics has been tilapia. And it's the best thing, because tilapia don't die. But you don't have to think about things you think about with trout and salmon or walleye. What's the chronic toxicity to potassium? And how does that affect their growth? I'm not talking an LC50, what concentration kills them. What does it do if we have 50 parts per million potassium? And then you can't use salt in an aquaponic system. Salt is how you prevent nitrite toxicity. Well, tilapia aren't toxic, nothing's toxic. But in a trout, salmon, or walleye, what ion would more effectively replace chloride? Because other ions do have an effect. And then, should I just quit? That was my research.
Well, it would be lovely.
I'm done.
You probably have more profound stuff.
Well, do consumer-facing research.
How about that?
Okay. We need better consumer education. We need to eat more seafood. We need to help the capital investor. Maybe we can revise the new market tax credit so that it applies to fish farming, and it's not allowed right now. Maybe we can get a government subsidy in the right instance. Leverage nonprofits. They're not the bad guys. I think if you say we're going to do a sustainable industry in Minnesota, you can get nonprofits and foundations to support it and put money into it and match your money. Because I think a lot of you guys need a match. And you need mentoring programs to strengthen the business plan so these guys actually realize before they build the facility that this is what their costs are going to be and this is, will they make money? We need trained personnel. I think you should use Cargill and Pentair and maybe some of the giant fish farms to come in and say, we have this opportunity, can you help us get there? Go to those guys and work with them. Organic standards have to be approved, in my mind. I'm done now. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Steve. We have time for a couple questions while the panelists gather. So panelists, come on up. And Ron has his hand up, Steve. And then
Steve, why do they push those Atlantics to such a large size on harvest? Is there any markets for like those 8 to 10 ounce fillets that are standard in the restaurant industry? And then you get rid of certain problems like early maturity, you get
Right.
sea life, and it's like,
Atlantic salmon has an expensive smolt. So they want to make, it's like a yellow perch. If you could raise a yellow perch to a pound, you'd be more profitable, but selling at 3 to a pound hurts you. And if you look at the market price, a 3 kilo salmon is less valuable than a 4 kilo, and a 5 is even more valuable. And it's because they get a better fillet yield, and it's easier for them to process and handle, and the consumer's used to that giant fillet.
they get a chunk of the fillet.
They're used to huge fillets.
thanks, Steve.